Okay, what we have here is a flank steak. Flank steak is a cut of meat commonly used for what's often referred to as London broil. It's certainly not the only cut that's used for London broil, but this is one of them. A flank steak is very popular. You see it at a lot of barbecues. It tends to be on the lean side, and people like it for that reason, but with anything lean, you also get something that's usually kind of chewy and can sometimes be a little bit tough. Nevertheless, we work with a lot of these. John's just going to show you a little bit about the trimming process involved. And again, you know, it's not a real tricky item to work with, but it does take a little bit of work. You frequently see this cut of meat taken and marinated and grilled. A lot of people like to do it like that. And there's a number of other things you can do with it. You can even cut it up for stir fry, but primarily what you're doing with this is just marinating it in something and grilling it. It doesn't have to be marinated, but frequently it is. You'll notice one thing about the flank steak, there's grain going up and down in this direction, and that means after you cook it and slice, you want to be sure to cut against the grain, which means going directly perpendicular, excuse me, to the direction of the grain. The grain's this way, you cut it this way. And that's true with most cuts of meat. Another cut of meat that's become very popular in recent years, primarily because restaurants and hotels have started serving it a lot, is a piece of meat called a hanger steak. A hanger steak is probably one of the trickier pieces of meat to trim, but it's a very tasty cut. In many ways it's like a flank, but it tends to have more marbling and more tenderness, a little bit of a richer flavor. It's something that you could take and marinate and grill if you want, or you can just leave it alone. Now what John's going to do here is he's going to take off outside fat that runs all around it. There's like a membrane, and he's going to get rid of some of the discolored area around it. Now what you have here essentially with a hanger steak is you always have two pieces that are attached. Right in the center here there's a membrane that runs through it and it connects them. And it would be nice if you could just cut straight down in order to separate these two pieces of hanger meat, because there's one here and one here, but they're kind of like Siamese twins. In fact, that's a good comparison. You can't just split Siamese twins in half. If you separate them, you have to very carefully follow along this membrane in order to get the one hanger separate from the other without wasting a lot of meat. John knows how to do that. I can do it about as badly as it can be done, so I'm going to turn it over to him. And you'll notice that he's kind of opening it up and working along one side of the membrane and just kind of slowly teasing the meat away so that the one is separating from the other without wasting a lot of meat. And you know, the better he can do this, the less profit we throw away and the better yield you get. Hanger steak we weigh after it's trimmed, unlike some of the other items we sell. And consequently, we want to make sure we do as good a job trimming it as we can, while at the same time making sure we don't waste a lot of it in the trimming process. So there, you'll notice this hanger is shaped like a piece of rope. When people ask me what it is, I often describe it as a kind of a thick piece of rope. It tends to be circular, which is unusual for a cut of meat. When people traditionally think of steak, they think of something that's flatter and more even. But again, this is a wonderful cut, and you're seeing it served a lot in restaurants these days because it's not anywhere near as pricey. We sell this right now for $9.95 a pound, completely trimmed. That means for an 8-ounce portion, you're paying $5. That's a nice price to pay for a very tasty piece of meat. A skirt steak is an outside diaphragm muscle, and when you buy skirt, it's very important to know there are two types, outside and inside. We only sell outside. The inside are tough as shoe leather and really only good for stew or for grinding. The outside are delicious as long as they have a lot of fat, marbling, the thing that makes it taste good. So what John's going to show you now is how the trimming process is involved in getting a skirt steak together. What he's going to do is trim around the edges, and there's a membrane that runs on both sides of it. You got to peel that off. And again, you need guys with skill to do it, because when you're peeling off that membrane, if you take it off haphazardly, you end up pulling off a lot of meat and ripping the thing apart. So he's getting in there right now. He's going along the side and making sure that he preserves as much of it as possible so that you get the steak you want. Now on each skirt there are two sides. One usually has a bunch of bands of fat on it, and that's the top side there. And then you've got the other side. Again, he's cutting along the edge, so that by cutting along the edge, he makes it so he's able to lift up the membrane more easily. When I refer to the membrane, John, if you hold on for just a second, this is the membrane that I'm speaking of, and this is what has to be lifted up. So, like the hanger, the skirt is something that we sell after it's been trimmed, so we want him to trim it as well as possible while leaving as much meat as possible, so that you get what you want and we don't throw too much away. And that's why we employ skilled meat cutters here, as opposed to someone like myself who could trim a skirt but pretty bad. There it is. Now it's wrapped up and ready to go. One of the things about a skirt is it's long and flat, and the grain is obvious. It goes this way. Now, unlike other things I've talked about, when you trim this, when you cut this into pieces, you want to cut with the grain like this to cut it into portions. You wouldn't want to cut like that. But at the same time, what you'd also want to do when you're cutting it into pieces is, it would be almost impossible to go against the grain here. You'd almost want to cut it into small pieces when you're cutting it up to eat and chew. I often describe this as being shaped like a belt, and you can see why. I mean, put this on if you wanted to, and maybe hold up your clothes for a little bit. It's a delicious piece of meat. It really only requires a little salt and pepper, and you grill it, and you're done, and it's wonderful. Sometimes you see these, and people take them, and they roll them up, and then they put a couple toothpicks in there, and they cut it in half. It's called a pinwheel. You could use this for stir fry if you want. There's a lot of things you can do with a flint. Anyway, this has been a look at behind the curtain at Mr. Brisket, how we process your steaks, and we hope you enjoyed it.